Hello and welcome to an MMA Top 10. In this video we will be discussing the top 10 greatest MMA wrestlers of all time. Now some fighters may be left out of this list, but those fighters will be covered in another video. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 10 goes to Jon Jones. Jon Jones started out wrestling in high school before dropping out of college to pursue MMA. In his early days of MMA, you could already see that his wrestling was levels above the rest of the fighters that he was facing, with notable wins over the likes of Shogun Rua, Ryan Bader and Vitor Belfort in his earlier days being prime examples of his wrestling ability. As he progressed in MMA, he continually progressed further and further as a striker, not needing to use his wrestling as much as he used to, which is why he's only number 10 on this list. Number 9 is Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is the former heavyweight champion of the UFC and is currently contracted to the WWE. Before he joined either promotion, Brock Lesnar was the number 1 amateur wrestler of his age in the entire country. He is a 2-time NCAA All-American wrestler and was the 2000 NCAA heavyweight champion, holding an amateur record of 206 wins and 5 losses in his 4 years at college. When he joined the UFC, Brock Lesnar's wrestling abilities were put on show, with wins over Min Soo Kim, Heath Herring, and finally a win over Randy Couture leading him to the title. His short UFC career is the only reason that he is not higher on this list today. Number 8 is Georges St. Pierre. Georges St. Pierre is the former UFC welterweight and middleweight champion and holds the record for the most consecutive title defenses in UFC welterweight history. Georges St. Pierre started out his UFC career focusing mainly on his striking ability to get him through fights, and after a loss against Matt Hughes for the vacant UFC welterweight title, Georges St. Pierre decided he needed to work on his wrestling ability and quickly picked up the skill with relative ease. He is another example of natural ability, as he has 0 amateur wrestling matches before and after joining the UFC. Georges St. Pierre's well-timed takedowns allowed him to secure victories over great opposition, such as Josh Koscheck, BJ Penn, and a revenge win over Matt Hughes that scored him the UFC welterweight crown. Number 7 is Demetrious Johnson. Demetrious Johnson is the current UFC flyweight champion and holds the record for the most consecutive title defenses in UFC history. Demetrious Johnson is a very well-rounded fighter whose striking and wrestling got him where he is today. Johnson is a very elusive fighter who is trained not only in freestyle wrestling but catch wrestling as well, under the coaching abilities of Matt Hume. His catch wrestling ability is evident in the fight against Ray Borg, where DJ pulled off one of the best submissions in UFC history, suplexing Borg high into the air before catching his arm and catching him in an armbar. There is no saying how far this man can go, but it's fair to say that he is the best flyweight fighter in the history of MMA, and is deserving of his place as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world today. Number 6 is Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman is the former UFC middleweight champion, gaining the belt after defeating longtime champion Anderson Silva. Weidman is a 2-time NCAA Division I All-American wrestler, placing 3rd in the NCAA tournament in his senior year, hence the nickname the All-American. Though he may not focus solely on his wrestling, it is up there with the best, nonetheless. His takedown attempts are usually very successful, most notably taking down Olympic silver medal winner Yoel Romero multiple times during their fight, which is an achievement in itself. Chris Weidman is a very dominant wrestler whose ability to take you down and control you is amazing. He has the ability to take top position very easily, and his mount is extremely dangerous, which is why he holds the number 6 place on my list. Number 5 is Chad Mendes. Chad Mendes is a 2-time Division I All-American wrestler, becoming the runner-up in the 2008 NCAA Division I division. Chad Mendes is an aggressive fighter who can take you either standing or on the ground. He has explosive power in either hand, which makes it difficult for opponents to counter, as they could become worried about taking punches and then get taken down. Chad Mendes has an amateur wrestling record of 64 wins with 14 defeats, and in his final year at college, finished the year with 30 wins with only 1 defeat. He was named the Pac-10 Wrestler of the Year for that year. His dominant wrestling translated well into the MMA world, where he has defeated notable fighters such as Cub Swanson, Clay Guida, and Ricardo Lamas, fighting twice for the UFC featherweight strap against Jose Aldo, and losing the second fight in a close decision which some people saw as a Chad Mendes win. Number 4 is Cain Velasquez. Cain Velasquez is the former UFC heavyweight champion and is an NCAA Division I All-American wrestler. He currently holds the record for the most takedowns in UFC heavyweight history, with 34 takedowns to his name. Though Cain Velasquez's boxing is also very good, he generally uses his grappling to gain the advantage over his opponents and rains down heavy strikes from the top, which is why he doesn't have a single submission to his name, as he prefers to use his strikes with his wrestling rather than submissions. He also has one of the best gas tanks in the UFC, which allows him to outwork his opponents, which is what he showed when he faced fellow UFC heavyweight Brock Lesnar. Cain Velasquez, in my opinion, is the best UFC heavyweight of all time. Number 3 on the list is Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib Nurmagomedov is one of the most aggressive wrestlers in MMA history. He currently holds a mixed martial arts record of 26 wins with 0 defeats, one of the best records in MMA history. His aggressive and powerful fighting style, along with his ability to outwork his opponent, allowed him to make it all the way to the top when he recently defeated Al Iaquinta to win the vacant UFC lightweight belt. He currently holds the record for the most takedowns in a fight, where he scored 21 takedowns in 3 rounds against Abel Trujillo. What else is there to say about the Eagle? I don't see many people out-wrestling him anytime soon, although there is one fighter on this list that I believe could give him a run for his money. Number 2 on my list is Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is the current UFC light heavyweight champion and former Olympic wrestler for Team USA. Here is another example of a fighter who has an amazing gas tank and consistently outworks his opponents inside the octagon. He always shows a good display, whether that be through his striking or through his wrestling. Whenever he gets hold of an opponent, he is able to control them with relative ease, even lifting the 6'5" Alexander Gustafsson through the air before slamming him onto the ground. He is also very good with his clinch, using the dirty boxing style which we have come to expect from him and his close friend Cain Velasquez, who consistently push each other to the limits in training. One of the greatest examples of Daniel Cormier using his wrestling was when he fought against Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson is also a former USA Olympic wrestler, but Daniel Cormier was able to control him with relative ease, throwing him through the air and ragdolling him like a child. Daniel Cormier, I believe, is the greatest wrestler in UFC history. Number 1 is Ben Askren. Now you might be thinking, you just said Daniel Cormier was the best wrestler in UFC history. Well, you are correct, I did say that. Ben Askren is a former ONE FC and Bellator welterweight champion. He is well known for his dominant style of wrestling and grappling. He is a former Team USA Olympic wrestler and won the 2009 Fort Lauderdale World Championship in freestyle wrestling. He mainly focuses on trying to get his opponents down to the ground in order to control them, which he's been able to do in every one of his fights so far. I never understand why this man was never allowed into the UFC. I believe he could have won the belt from whoever had it at the time. Although it's never too late, he is only 33, which is still fairly young compared to other fighters on this list. Please note that this is only my personal opinion, and you guys may see it in a completely different way to what I do. Please comment below who you would rate as the top 10 MMA wrestlers of all time. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more MMA Top 10s.